he can feel free. After I share Rabbi Mordecai's bio, you can feel free to share anything else you'd like. So, Rabbi Liebling began his career working as a community organizer and activist. And after reading an essay by the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, it really profoundly resonated with his own beliefs and marked a transformative moment in his life. And he realized that he would like to become a rabbi, and that was the most effective way that he could be an agent for social change. So he decided to enroll in the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And in 2010, he founded the Social Justice Organizing Program at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College to educate rabbinical students about social justice and Judaism. He served on many various boards of national and international organizations, and he was a founding board member of Rabbis for Human Rights of North America, which is now known as Teruah. And he serves as the senior advisor at Power Interfaith, which is the largest faith-based grassroots organizing network in Pennsylvania. And importantly, his family was the subject of the documentary film Praying with Lior, which we're going to focus on today. And it follows his son, Lior, who has Down syndrome, on his path to his bar mitzvah. So, Rabbi Mordecai, would you like to add anything else about
Oh, that was
yourself?
great. That was a lot. So
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Try to get as much as we can about you in there. So, first of all, I wanted to start. Could you talk about your own religious affiliation and observance, and about your family's religious observance for people who might not know?
Sure. I there are several different denominations within liberal Judaism, and liberal meaning non-Orthodox Judaism, and about 85 to 90% of Jews in America are liberal or non-Orthodox Jews. And I am part of the Reconstructionist denomination, which is the one that was developed in the United States beginning in the 1920s. Uh, and uh, uh, I think that for me, the most important difference between Reconstructionism and the other denominations is our rejection of the idea of chosenness, um, and uh, believing that there's no God who would choose one people over another. So we have rejected the notion of chosenness, and maybe that's the way we differ most significantly from the other Jewish liberal denomination. I've been a rabbi for, I guess, 40 years at this point, which is a while, and sort of brought up our family in the Jewish tradition and the Reconstructionist tradition, and observance wise, I think one of the in addition to observing holidays, et cetera, certainly one of the most important things is observing Shabbat, the Sabbath, which in the Jewish tradition begins on Friday night and ends on Saturday evening. If you remember your book of Genesis, it says, then there was evening and then there was day one, the same thing for day two. There was evening, then there was day. So in the Jewish tradition, the day begins at sundown. So Sabbath begins for us Friday night when the sun goes down, and ends on Saturday when the sun goes down on Saturday night. So we always, mark Shabbat with a traditional meal and candle lighting and saying blessings, and refrain on refrain from work, on Shabbat. That's an important practice, I believe, to try to refrain from work. And in our family, we try to refrain from emails, etc., on Shabbat as well. So that's a little bit about our practice.
And do you lead services and these days or go to services?
I have never been a congregational rabbi. That has never been my calling. Done I've worked in the nonprofit sector for my whole rabbinate, partly in the Jewish world and partly in the interfaith world. Um, but I have never been called to be a congregational rabbi. That's just not been who I am. Um, but as a family and as individuals, we attend synagogue, but I don't lead things. I mean, occasionally I'm called upon to lead something, and the Jewish New Year for the trees is next week, Tu B'Shvat, and I will be co-leading a Tu B'Shvat, observance at our synagogue. But in general, that's not what my calling has been.
So your synagogue is also Reconstructionist, though.
Yes, yeah, I belong to a Reconstructionist synagogue. Yeah.
Great. Well, also, I wanted to ask you about your social justice advocacy and um, to maybe talk a little about that, as well as if disability inclusion has been any part of, or disability justice has been any part of that. Um, both of those.
Well, my rabbinate has been a lot about social justice work. I spent 10 years at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, training rabbis to do social justice organizing work, and that's been sort of social justice widely conceived. Looking at a lot of particularly issues of economic justice in this country and racism, in particular. Um, so I have worked on a lot of issues like that. Um, Truthfully, I have not been very involved in disability justice work. It's never been, oddly enough, I mean, I've done things here and there with Lior, my son, but I have not been I've for one reason or another, it's not been my area of focus. Um, yeah. I mean, I occasionally do things around it. I've taken Lior to Washington, D.C., where we've lobbied on behalf of legislation uh, to benefit people with disabilities, in particular, legislation that allowed them to set up savings accounts so people with disabilities can accumulate uh, savings because they weren't allowed to, so the ABLE Act. So I remember I took Lior and I went and Lior testified before a Senate subcommittee, and we spoke with several senators. And I've done a few things like that, with him. But in terms of my greater work around social justice issues, it really hasn't focused on disability justice.
Would you say it's more about racial justice, you
I would
said?
say it's more about economic justice, racial justice, uh, has really, yeah,
And
been,
also training people
yeah,
to
yeah,
organize. So,
yeah, and also environmental justice. I've done a lot of work around environmental justice over the last
mm.
30 years. Yeah, yeah,
Well, those are all really important areas as well.
yeah.
Um, and also, I was curious about some of because we're an interfaith network, um, some of what you've done is related to interfaith. Could you talk a little about that
Sure.
too?
So the work I've done the last 5 years, I worked for an organization called Power, which is a multi-faith organization, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and other non-Abrahamic religions as well. And we work with congregations of all faiths throughout Pennsylvania, working with people, on these social and economic justice issues that we believe that it's our social justice traditions really have many of the same teachings and really call on us, to take care of, as biblically they would say the least of those perhaps, or those in need, but we certainly try to live out the precepts of our religious traditions, which really call on us to take care of, or not take care of, but help empower and work with people who are, as some say, closest to the pain, to be able to bring about changes that are necessary. And we feel that it's very important to do in an interfaith context. We can show how the similarities of our traditions call on justice, and that it's a way to unite people across a variety of boundaries. So that has been, important work for me. Also, I've been I work with a number of different interfaith organizations. Another one that is called I'm on the board of the Faith and Politics Institute, which works actually with members of Congress to promote the legacy of Congressman John Lewis, who was, of course, a great civil rights leader. And we work across denominations and faith traditions to really promote the work of anti-racism in this country, particularly with members of Congress.
Wow. Well, we also follow that philosophy, trying to focus on our similarities, for disability inclusion when we gather people from different faith traditions. We're
Right.
trying to, in a different, context, but the same principle. So it's great work that you're doing. So, as you know, this is Jewish Disability Inclusion Month, and that's one of the reasons that we really wanted to highlight you and also your family, your film. So, could you talk a little about how you think inclusion in the Jewish community has changed? I mean, you've been a rabbi quite a long time. So, have you seen, things improving,
Oh,
things?
there's been enormous change, really enormous change. So Lior has Down syndrome, and Lior was born in 1991. And when I first started looking into schools for him, um, there were very few programs in Jewish schools for kids with disabilities. I think we're going to see some film clips soon of him and his school that he went to. So he went to an Orthodox Jewish day school, and it had a pioneering program. It was the first program in the greater Philadelphia area. In Philadelphia, I think is the third or fourth largest Jewish community in the country. And this was the first program in the greater Philadelphia area in the Jewish community that was an inclusion program that provided a day school education specifically for Jewish kids with disabilities. That program that he was one of the first students in has now mushroomed to be in every Jewish day school in the greater Philadelphia area and many around the country. The vast majority of Jewish kids do not go to Jewish day schools, but go to supplemental schools, either 2 or 3 days a week. Uh, and there was hardly any inclusion there when 25 years ago. And I have to say that the movie that we're about to see clips of, Praying with Lior, had the effect that every documentary filmmaker dreams of. There were many conferences started in around the United States based on this film in the Jewish community for Jewish educators. And this film helped spark a real revolution in the Jewish community about inclusion, where 25 years ago, it was very unusual to have a kid with any kind of serious disabilities have a bar or bat mitzvah. That has changed. radically. So where now it's commonplace for kids with disabilities to have, to have one. Um, so I th and 25 years ago or so, it was rare to see a synagogue that had a ramp for wheelchairs to go up to uh, the bima, the platform or the stage where the rabbi is and where the Torah is, the ark is, and now it's somewhat commonplace. Not every synagogue, but most synagogues have some form of ramp now to get up to the bima. There was not inclusion for people with hearing challenges. So I think that in Lior's lifetime, I have seen enormous changes in the Jewish community around inclusion. Jewish Disability Month is only probably less than 20 years old. Um, I think that I'm not that we had anything to do with producing or directing or even having the idea of the movie. We were just the focus of it. So Alana Trachtman gets all the credit for this, but I think the movie played a very, very important role in that. There's now a Jewish Disabilities Film Festival that this
Nice.
helped spark. So it's really an international one that this was a part of. Uh, After several years, I guess a year or two after the movie came out, the movie won the first prize in the International Disabilities Film Festival, and my wife and Lior went to Moscow for the ceremony. We were shocked to win the first prize, but we did. Um, and there's a phenomenon now of, movies and all kinds of things, focusing on people with disabilities, and I think the religious world was not in the forefront of that initially, but I think has really been catching up and has done groundbreaking work in the last year. So there's just been such a sea change in the idea of inclusion in education, in particular, in the Jewish world over the last 25 years. Just completely different.
Wow. So that was did you say that was in the 90s when he
Well,
was in?
Lior was born in 91, and so he started day school in 95 or 96. And as I said, his was a very experimental program that mushroomed. So it's really the last 25 years or so that there has been. The movie came out in 2005 or 2006 or something like that, and sparked all kinds of conferences. So it's really 20 years that there's been this serious change in the Jewish community around inclusion.
Would you say it's typical for Jewish schools to now, include kids with all kinds of special needs or disabilities? And
Yes.
also, are they taught inclusion in the curriculum as well?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it's now more often than not that a Jewish school is going to have some form of inclusion program, which was not true 25 years ago.
Well, I think it would be great to show a clip of,
Yeah.
of the school, honestly, because some of his classmates, what really struck me was you can see that they're kids with just normal, social
Yeah.
concerns and, learning concerns. But then
Yeah.
some of the comments of his classmates, they just seem way beyond their
They're
ears.
really amazing. Yeah.
So I think we are going to show
Great.
a clip from his school and with his classmates.
Well, you are Gavin's like off key, but it's good.
It's hard to understand him sometimes, but Hashem understands everyone in their own way.
Some people they like do batting scores of the Phillies game or stuff. He just davens. He just davens. That's what he does.
In that sense, he is a loving child. So far, we've been talking about blessings, right? Since this is a part of our Devar Torah, what kind of lessons do we learn from the Torah? Can you say?
I forgot already.
So why is it important to study the Torah?
It's very important to Hashem.
Okay. But what does the Torah teach us?
It teaches us the community.
Community.
Yeah. The community in the sort of life we do it in our hearts.
I didn't quite follow that. You want to explain? It sounds very good, but I need you to say it again so I understand better.
Because Hashem did it when you've been in our souls and we feel connected to Hashem.
Well, that sounds pretty good. That sounds very smart. You like that?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I bet there's more you could think of because that was a good one.
And then if we do the Torah,
Yeah.
it gives us it goes from generation to generation.
So the Torah goes from generation to generation, and what happens?
Then comes from into your soul. And we say generation to generation every day.
So now I have a question for you. Do you know what generation means?
So
No. Generation to generation means from great-grandparents to grandparents to parents to children.
but the Torah gives us the community, and we feel us. We need the community.
You've definitely listened to too many sermons in your life about community.
And the community gives us back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, in every step.
In every step.
Hallelujah! Am I finished my Torah?
I will address.
Tomorrow, you're giving your Bar Mitzvah speech to 300 people. If it was my Bar Mitzvah, I'd be really nervous. How come you're so calm?
To 300.
By being strong and by being strength, and you need to be encouraged because you're already a person.
But what if I was afraid I was going to mess up?
Don't go fast, go slow.
What if I was nervous?
And don't be nervous and be happy. You can do it. Smart. You know you can.
How do you know?
Because you're our friend. You know how you do it. This such a heart beats.
What?
It's just your heart and you beating, 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 beating.
5 words you pronounce wrong. 2 years before your brain starts.
Well, actually, we switched the cliff, so we can talk about this first, and we'll show his school after. So this was about him preparing for the bar mitzvah and the speech. Could you talk a little about the experience of how you helped him in preparing? And then I'd like to know more about like how he's continued to, develop in his faith or
Sure, just for the people listening. So when his classmates were talking about davening means praying. It's the Hebrew or Yiddish word for prayer is to daven. So he was leading it. So the movie is called Praying with Lior because it's about the fervency with which Lior was able to pray, and lead prayers. The filmmaker was at the same Jewish retreat that we were for the Jewish high holidays one year, and she heard Lior praying and was very taken by it. And though she had never made a movie before, she decided she wanted to make a movie about Lior based on the intensity and fervor of his prayer. So that's the beginning, and that's what his classmates are talking about when they're talking about Lior's davening. That means his prayer. Um, so it is one of the central features, if not the central feature of a coming of age ceremony for Jewish kids, a bar mitzvah, is the teenager explaining a section of the Torah. So the Torah, some of you might not know, is the first 5 books of the Bible, of the 5 books of Moses. And in the Jewish tradition, we read a particular section every week. It's divided up across the year, and every week has its own particular section. And what the student does is his job, her job, their job is to explain what some teaching from that week's reading. So is working with him on that week's reading, and trying to focus on a few sentences to see what he was able to say about it. So everything that he ended up saying that day at his bar mitzvah were words that he actually said. I mean, I put them together, but I worked with him. You saw that clip, but it went on for hours over months, where I would work with him to try to get his thinking about it. So that was the talk that he put together that took us a while to do. So you have to remember that Lior went to synagogue every Saturday morning his entire life. Before that, so he had heard many, 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 many sermons, or he uses the word devar Torah, which means a word of Torah in Hebrew, and that's what the rabbi does. The rabbi gives a devar Torah, or no, it doesn't have to be the rabbi, or could be a congregant, giving an explanation of that week's Torah portion. So that's what we're doing in that clip. I'm helping him think about what he wants to say.
Would you say, what are the ways that he was most engaged with the Judaism? Because in the film we see him in the school studying, we see him, in the synagogue singing and drumming and then leading the service. So I suppose back then, but also now, how
He's still most engaged with prayer. Lior still goes to synagogue pretty much every Saturday morning. That's still his practice. He, during COVID, he did it virtually. Occasionally, our synagogue still has virtual services. If he's not working on a Wednesday morning, our synagogue has a Wednesday morning service that he attends online, doesn't miss it. So prayer is still a very important vehicle for him in Judaism, that has continued for him nonstop. So he has consistently gone to synagogue on Saturday mornings, and has consistently been involved in prayer. So that's something that has stayed with him.
would you say he also has like a personal faith kind of, as well as in the community, connected with the community?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, he has his own relationship to God, or as he sees in the Klipster, Hashem, which is the Yiddish way to refer to God.
Yeah, it's very unique how he expresses some of his feelings about connecting with God, or with
But
Judaism.
just for your listeners, that they might not understand the difference between Yiddish and Hebrew. Hebrew is the language that of course that the Bible was written in, and of the ancient Israelites, and of course the language of Israel today. So it's a through language that's a couple of thousand years old. Yiddish is a language that Jews developed in Central and Eastern Europe, beginning in like the 15th or 16th century. Its roots were, I guess, Old German, and but evolved separately more in Eastern Europe, and it's the language that Central and Eastern European Jews spoke for centuries. And so some words are more used from Yiddish and some words more from Hebrew.
I guess Lior, he knows some Hebrew, right?
Well, he can, I mean, I think that's he really can't speak Hebrew, but he can read Hebrew fluently, which is, Hebrew is written in a different alphabet and it's written from right to left as opposed to left to right. So, I mean, the first thing that I think that surprised a lot of people was that somebody with Down syndrome could read in two languages. And reading the Torah is not easy because not only is it written from right to left in a different alphabet, totally different script, but it doesn't have vowels the way it's written in the Torah, and no periods, no vowels. So it's not easy to read. I guess there are periods in the Torah, but there are no vowels and no other punctuation. So the fact that he could learn to read in two languages and chant, was really also broke a lot of preconceptions about what somebody with Down syndrome could do.
So he did actually read from the Torah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think we're going to show the other clip now that we were wanting to show in the school, which also, as you said, shows his study and his Jewish learning. So, Tom, you let me know if we can show that yet. And while we're waiting, I can ask you, does Lior have any, teachers or mentors now, in the Jewish community?
Yeah, he's very close to the rabbi of our synagogue, Rabbi Sean Zevit. So he certainly looks up to Rabbi Sean, as a mentor. So, yeah, he has maintained a very close relationship, with our rabbi.
Okay, I think we're ready here.
Okay.
I don't even know if Lior knows he's different. He always seems... God makes every person with a different test in this world. So God's test probably for Lior is maybe, I don't really know, but maybe with Down syndrome, he thinks Lior could probably withstand this kind of test.
Hashem never makes a mistake. It's Hashem just wanted him to be like that.
We don't know what God's doing. When God made Lior have Down syndrome, it also becomes a test to us. How we treat Lior, if we do things with Lior, that's part of our test. I always let Lior choose a game, and I always let him have his way because I want to make it easier for him in life. Okay, Sammy. Some days Leo's just in a hugging mood, I guess. Like today, he gave me a couple hugs. He's having fun, so why not?
That is such a great clip. Well,
Yes.
so this school was also in your area where you live
Well,
in.
it's a little far for us, actually. He had probably a 40-minute commute to school every day. So it wasn't the most convenient place for him to go to school, but it was the best place for him to go to school because they really valued who he was and really took care of his soul. And they understood who he was. The woman who is the principal of the school, one of the reasons the school, or maybe a primary reason why the school was so inclusive, the principal's daughter was somebody who has CP, cerebral palsy, and she was committed that every Jewish child who wanted an education, Jewish education, should be able to have one. So she really pioneered having inclusive schools. And she's still the principal to this very day and does amazing work.
So it really came from the leadership.
Oh yeah, can't bring a lot. I can tell you one little story. What his in his first year in the school, some kids were teasing him, and they I think they got him to pull down his pants, and they were kids, they're teasing him, and the woman, not the principal, but the woman who ran the special ed inclusion program, who really created this program that later became replicated all over the city. She came into the class and said the following: does Hashem, God, does Hashem ever make a mistake? Students said, "Oh, of course, no. Is everything that Hashem does perfect? Of course, everything that God does is perfect. Did God make a mistake when He made Lior? Of course, no, God didn't make a mistake when he made Lior." And then she said, and this was at the very beginning of the school year. Lior had only been to school for a couple of weeks, and the Jewish high holidays were coming up, and the Day of Atonement was coming up. And certainly in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, if somebody under 13 commits a sin, then it's on their father's sort of ledger that the father will be punished for the sin, and sort of in that tradition. And so the teacher said, your fathers are going to Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement is coming, and the sin is now your father's sin, and he has to know about it. So I need to know who in this class encouraged Lior to pull down his pants. And 3 children, raised their hand because they were terrified that something bad was going to happen. And they understood that God doesn't make mistakes. And she called them outside the classroom and said, "Okay, I need you to be God's helpers now. I need you to make sure that nobody ever teases Lior again." And they said yes. And for the next 8 years he was in that school, and I never heard him being teased again. So it's a school that had values and really lived its values and taught its kids to live its values. So it was a really beautiful instance of how you interrupt teasing, get kids to be on your side. I just thought they handled it so beautifully.
That was one of my questions, is if he has encountered either in the school or in the synagogue. It seems very inclusive. Had he encountered, well, you just told the story, like, was it more positive for him or more, challenging
Oh
or
no, he was totally, after that, that was the only incident in 8 years in that school. He was definitely celebrated, partly because that was a community that really valued prayer. And they saw that was something that for lack of a better word, excelled in. So they valued his prayer. So he he was a very beloved and valued member of that community. And I would say the same is true for our synagogue, that he is very a valued and beloved member. And in fact, our synagogue every year honors 2 or 3 members for their contribution to the synagogue. And last year, Lior was one of the people honored for contribution to the synagogue. And that's a lot because of his, not only his regular attendance, but the spirit that he brings to prayer and that he brings to the community, and that gives really, I think, well, they said it is inspirational to other people. So he remains a very valued member of the community. When he left that school after 8th grade and then went to a charter school here in Philadelphia that had a very good inclusion program, I have to say he was I I don't recall any instances of him being teased in that school. That school was very was a public school, it was a charter school, but was run with really strong and clear values, and they wouldn't tolerate any form of teasing. And he was a valued member of that community as well. He was in a school play a couple of times, and so yeah, I mean, we were very. I think he has an unusual in that he has not experienced a lot of bullying and teasing, that we were lucky in both his elementary school and his high school had really strong and clear values.
That's great. That's great to hear. And we have just one more clip before we want to have time for Q&A from participants, but we have another clip from the Bar Mitzvah, I believe. So we'd like to show that.
The history of cinema.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
The Torah is important because it's important. The Torah goes from generation to generation and goes into your soul. We feel Hashem every time we say the door from generation to generation. The Torah teaches us about community. We see the light of Hashem in our community, and we feel it every day. My heart is for Hashem and it's diving. I like talking to Hashem. I feel happy and excited. I love davening. Gives me energy, gives me power, makes me strong. I'm thankful for the blessings in my life. I'm thankful for my family. My mama Deborah, my dad, my mama Lynn, for my sisters, Nina and Anna, and for my brothers, Yoni and Ben. I'm thankful for all of you being here today and for the love in our lives.
How does it feel to be Lior's sister and see his...
That clip always gets me emotional, really.
I started crying again.
Me
I haven't
too.
seen the clip in a long time, but whoa, I immediately got teared up.
It takes you back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really a wonderful, special thing to see from the service. So I would like to invite anyone to put their questions into the Q&A, and we can take questions from participants now. We have time, or if others would like to ask questions verbally, that might be okay too.
I have a question while we're waiting on others, if they might want to drop their questions into the chat. I'm happy to read them out, and then Rabbi Mordecai. Um, we do have a comment here that says, just what a blessing your son is. No one told me I would need a tissue. Thank you for sharing his story.
Well, if you go see the movie, it's definitely a three hanky movie, I gotta tell you.
Rabbi Mordecai, while I'm waiting on other questions, I'll mention we watched this movie as part of my seminary training, and I was fascinated with it. I loved the integration and the inclusion that was done at this high level. That it wasn't just we're including you for the sake of including you, but truly experiencing the full richness and depth of religious engagement. My original question was about whether Lior now has any specific role in helping out with leading integration charges for other students with disabilities. But I think maybe a better question is, have the institutions involved, has his former school or your synagogue taken on any kind of leadership role within their communities to expand and teach others? Maybe either their processes, their back end bylaws, and the way that they have done this, or at least in encouraging others. Have you seen any kind of leadership in those ways in helping this become a bigger, more fuller picture of inclusion across wider institutions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is now, as I said, when he started in school, this was a pilot program, and one school is now all over the greater Philadelphia area. There is now a whole organization in the greater Philadelphia area that is just focused on inclusion in Jewish education and in synagogues. There are multiple programs in different places for inclusion. It is actually quite extraordinary. He was there. He was part of for years a cooking program that was an inclusionary cooking program. And some of these programs are just for people with disabilities, and some of them are just inclusive for all kinds of people. So that it has grown in many ways. Institutions have grown up around it. This is Jewish Disability Awareness Month, as you said, and he already every year he has one or two Jewish institutions, asks Lior to come and speak. He lives in a supervised independent living community that is subsidized by the Jewish community. It's not only there are non-Jewish kids involved as well. Not kids, they're all adults. They're in their 30s and 40s, but it's subsidized by the Jewish community. So yes, there has been just enormous change and institutionalization of inclusion. Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Sometimes, there are many things to worry and despair about, in the world, but and we question whether there is progress or not progress. But one area I can always point to where there has been real progress is inclusion. That the opportunities that somebody with Down syndrome has today did not exist 20 years ago, certainly did not exist 40 years ago, that this is probably certainly in the United States, the best time ever for somebody with Down syndrome to be born. When he was born, I was still told stories by people who were 10 and 15 years older than me who gave away children with Down syndrome, because that is what most obstetricians encouraged people to do. So people just 10 years older than him were mostly institutionalized and deprived of lots of opportunities. So if there's one area in the United States where we can unequivocally say there has been real progress, it has been inclusion of people with intellectual disabilities.
Wonderful. Well, and in line with that wonderful message of the hope of inclusion, we have a good question here in the chat. What do you feel is essential in helping Jewish communities and congregations cultivate their inclusive culture? I am a Jewish educator who works with organizations such as Matan to empower Jewish educators to optimize inclusion. And also, FYI, the Jewish Disabilities Film Festival is called Real Abilities.
Yes.
So that's from Deborah.
Well, I think, the best thing to do is, in part, is to study best practices. There are some wonderful practices all around the country that, and for Jewish educators to, study those best practices. I think it's important for every synagogue community to either have a special committee or a subcommittee that is focused on the issues of inclusion. I think it's important for the synagogue to do community to do surveys to ask people what is that they need to feel included, whether it's hearing, or seeing, or various forms of access. And important to understand that within the school, there need to be resources allocated for special education. The practices exist. We know what to do now. We might not have known 25 years ago, but there is a serious body of best practices now that can be studied. So it is up to there needs to be a will, in each Jewish community, whether it's the synagogue or the community, the wider community as a whole. Sometimes a synagogue doesn't have the resources to do its own inclusion work, but the wider community does, and there are programs to go to. So there aren't excuses now of that we don't know how to do it. We do know how to do it. So it's really a matter of having the will to go ahead and implement the practices that are known.
And stories like Lior's and yours, of course, help develop that will.
Absolutely. Yes, yeah. I think the movie has been widely shown in the Jewish community, thankfully, and has really encouraged a lot of good practices that, I have to say I'm a little bit astonished still how much impact one movie had on changing ideas and opening up conversations.
Well, and right in line with that, our next comment here comes from Kathy, who says, this movie came out the year that I started seminary, and I was trying to do more work with disability and theology. But at that time, there weren't a whole lot of resources. I remember sitting there in tears because of his story and faith, but also because I couldn't believe that there was a movie telling such an intimate spiritual story so well in that year. And this was the year after my beloved aunt with Down syndrome had died.
Wow.
A lot of time has passed since then, and there are so many more stories being shared. I wonder if you think that this film helped to break through some of the kinds of barriers, not only in faith communities, but in media around persons with disabilities, helping to open the door for more stories to be told. I think that it has. Thank you, and Lior.
Well, you said it really well. And yeah. The movie has been widely shown across faith communities, and I think it did inspire a lot of people and give people the hope that it was possible to make changes. And I think then people went ahead, and made those changes. And the film festival started in part as a result of this. There has been really, not just because of this movie, of course, but there's been really an explosion in the media in the last 10 or 15 years, in stories about people with disabilities. And, this was a groundbreaking movie. And I just have a lot of appreciation and respect for Alana Trachtman, who the producer and director who came up with this idea and had the courage to make this movie and went into a lot of personal credit card debt in order to raise the money to make it. Eventually, I think she broke even on it, I hope. But it was a big risk on her part, to make this movie. Not knowing if anybody would really come to see it or yeah.
I don't see any more from our chat, but I just want to echo the sentiments that I was seeing in there of the gratitude that this has been offered to share someone's story, to share the intimate details of spiritual development is a lot. And it's a lot to do that when it's your own family. And so for the risk that you put out in allowing this to be made and allowing Lior to take that center stage, I think just on behalf of everyone who has seen the movie, I want to thank you. And I'm sure they do as well.
Thank you, Topher. Appreciate it.
I want to thank you, Rabbi Mordecai, for taking a look back at Lior and the film. And it's the first time I had seen it. Just looking back has been such a joy to see how your experience, Lior's experience, and the movie have inspired so many. And so I too want to thank you for sharing that, for sharing Lior, and for talking with us today. This has been really inspirational, I think, and it also affirms our faith in humanity and God's goodness and how He works in all of our lives. So, thank you for helping us affirm that today. And this is recorded, and so we'll send this out, and hopefully you can share that with others. And just one last announcement before we leave. Next Tuesday, we'll have a multi-faith panel on accommodations in worship. And so we will, Rabbi Michael Levy will be with us, and Victoria White will be with us to talk about different ways accommodations are made during worship in different faith traditions. So hope you can join us then. And until then, God bless you, Rabbi Mordecai, and give our best to Lior and your family too.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you so much for the work that you do to spread the message of inclusion.
You're welcome. Have a good day now.
Take care.